Hello and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynn Testoni. I'm a journalist and content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we bring you all kinds of tips, tricks and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business.
I used spreadsheets for 15 years, but when you freelance, the time comes when your business gets more complicated and I needed something more. And Rounded was the accounting software that finally converted me. It helped simplify tax time while still letting me take ownership of what goes on in my freelance business. It also gives me heaps of visibility over my finances. And although I use an accountant and a bookkeeper, that suits me because I like to see exactly what's happening with my cash flow.
Right. And don't forget, gold members of Rachel's List can save 20% on the first year of any annual Rounded plan. Hi, Rach. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, good. You're back from a nice little break, so that's nice.
Yes, a remote cabin with no Wi-Fi.
Oh, good and bad, good and bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So before we start chatting with our guests, I just wanted to give another shout out to the Content Bite Summit and remind you that even if you can't get to Sydney, we've got virtual tickets available. So it's a great way to hear all the speakers from the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, we are starting to pick up a few virtual ticket holders now, which is really good to see. And it happens, doesn't it? Life and air miles get in the way. So we're really glad that we can offer that option as well as the VIP and the payment plan tickets and the day passes and everything else. So if you haven't checked it out, you can see everything at the contentbitesummit.com.au.
Yeah, fantastic. But of course, the podcast goes on, and this week we have another inspiring writer, freelance journalist and copywriter, Steve Colquhoun.
Great. I know Steve because he's in the Rachel's List Gold group and has been part of the community for a long time. So it's great to have him on.
Shall I introduce Steve?
Yes, please go for
it. Steve Colquhoun is a freelance journalist, editor and copywriter based in Geelong, Victoria. A journalist since the day he left high school at the age of 17. He's worked in and around the media ever since, including The Age and the Herald Sun in Melbourne and the Cairns Post newspapers. As a motoring journalist, national editor of luxury lifestyle website Executive Style, web editor of the Rob Report Australia and digital editor of Executive Traveller, Steve has been fortunate or lucky enough to travel the world to cover some of the world's most upmarket products and experiences. Since 2016, he's been telling stories and meeting the content needs for a portfolio of clients that include Mercedes-Benz, Deakin University, NAB, Visit Victoria, and many others. Welcome, Steve.
Wow, welcome. We are so glad to have you here, Steve.
Thank you very much for having me.
Wow, it's a great career. So tell us a little bit about it today. How did you start and what have been some of your highlights?
Well, yeah, look, I jumped into journalism straight out of high school with a cadetship in a country newspaper, and we were, doing what my editor used to call the parish pump.
That's how I started too, Steve. So yes,
births, deaths, marriages, all that sort of stuff. My first big story was in my second week of my cadetship, and I had to go to the home of the mother of the author Peter Carey. He had just won the Booker Prize, and I had to sit in her living room and interview his dear old mum about her son winning the Booker Prize. So that was my first big break.
Oh, wow. Yes, that's right. I remember he is from regional Victoria, isn't he? Yeah,
Bacchus Marsh, which was that was where I landed with my cadetship, and since then I've worked my way through suburban and metropolitan newsrooms. Eventually found my specialty as a motoring journalist, and then became the national editor of a luxury lifestyle section, and then took a voluntary redundancy and out into freelancing where I am now.
Wow. I don't think we've actually had a motoring journalist on the podcast before. And this excites me. Actually, this will interest you, Steve. I have done one motoring story in my life. I got flown to Western Australia and I had to pick up a convertible. I couldn't tell you what it was now. Which is probably why I should never do motoring journalism again. But I had to drive it to Margaret River where they had a photographer waiting, and I was at a vineyard where they did all the dishes on the table. I had to try all of them, and then they put the car in the vineyard and took snaps of it. And then I had to drive it back to Melbourne, stayed overnight in a hotel and flew back to Sydney. It was like some weird dream. But I will remember all the truckies honking me on the highway and everyone loved this car. You know, I was like, wow, you know, probably the price of a small house somewhere in in the regions. But yeah, it was very cool to drive.
Sounds like a fairly typical experience, particularly in the lifestyle motoring side of things. As a I guess a mainstream motoring journalist, I've had a lot of experiences that are very similar to that, but also some fairly, what would you say, some pretty hard times. Because it's a tough industry. You've got to know, you kind of got to know your stuff. It's very competitive and you've got to work pretty hard. And, you know, I guess it's a kind of a first world problem, but there's a lot of flying on the back of the clock out of Australia to other parts of the world where launches are taking place, and a lot of time away from home, away from family and kids, and a lot of very, very long days. So yeah, there's some incredible perks in motoring journalism. I've driven some of the most amazing cars on the most amazing roads in the world. I don't exactly know why the culture dictates this, but they do tend to put you up in some of the most amazing hotels and feed you with some of the most amazing food as well. So yeah, there's just perks galore, but you do have to work your ass off for it. And particularly in the last handful of years, since video has become a really big component of motoring journalism, you not only have to go to the launch and get the news story and write the review of the car, but then you also have to throw yourself in front of a camera and tell the world about the same car, which is at least doubling the workload, if not more. So look, it's a really hard, tough, specialist kind of a lifestyle, but my God, the rewards are amazing.
Yeah. You just mentioned like you have to know your stuff. Does that mean that you could basically pull a car apart and put it back together, or are you just like all the gizmos? You know how to handle the dashboard really well.
Look, I'm not a get my hands dirty kind of guy. I've never been one to pull cars apart or anything like that. But I've always, from day dot, I've always been interested in cars, liked them, intrinsically learned about them, because you know you're just attracted to the things that you know and you enjoy. And then when that time came, it actually happened because I did a little segue into PR, and I picked up a junior sort of corp comms role with an automotive manufacturer, and that kind of just prized the door open a little bit and allowed me to then start pitching stories to a motoring publication, which then started giving me more and more work, and then finally I became full-time, and then eventually became an editor. So it was just kind of pursuing that passion and just sort of building on kind of the interest and the love that I already had there.
I've done a few junkets with motoring journalists back in the day when I worked in magazines, and it did seem like a good life. I mean, I drove a new Toyota around Uluru, and salt plains and mud things, and it was amazing off-road, and it was superb. And I've done a few things, but it was really blokey. I found it was really blokey. The guys tended to be older, and I also found, because as you sort of alluded to, that there was a lot of running around, picking up cars, dropping off. Almost all of them had stay-at-home wives that did all the running around and dropping off the cars and everything. Is that still the case?
Look, I would say that's pretty consistent with when I started in the industry, which is going back probably close to 20 years ago now. That was definitely the case. I think that that's changing, and it's and definitely for the better. I think that there's been an acknowledgement at some point that women do play a very large role in the decision-making process around car purchases in most households, and that the media needed to represent them a lot better than it was. And I think that's been a really very positive change. There are a lot more women in positions to write about cars, and I think that can only be a good thing. But, you know, it is always going to be an industry that has, you know, that appeals to men. I think there's more of a how do I put this very delicately? I think instinctually men are more drawn to that style of of writing. It's changing, and I think it's been for the better.
Yeah, I was just going to say, because when I was an editor of a magazine, which was a food magazine, I sort of trained with the editor of Wheels and Modern Motor, which were the classic sort of motoring journalists. And it was a view into a world I didn't even know existed, having never read those magazines. But it was a really interesting culture. And those guys, really beautiful writers, really good writers. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some of the best writers I've ever seen work for motoring publications, and they just have beautiful turns of phrase. And it's not just all about horsepower and gear shifts and 0 to 100 times. There's a lot more. There's a lot of nuance in it, and the best of them are real artists. So there's a lot to be said for it. It's a great lifestyle for those who are able to maintain that kind of lifestyle on the road. At the time I had young kids at home, and that was putting an unfair strain on my partner, so I had to step back from it. So I sort of moved into other areas of journalism, but I really did enjoy my time there, and I've maintained my love of motoring as I've moved into freelance, and I guess we'll talk about that a bit later, but that's become a large part of my freelance career as well.
Well, let's talk about it now. I mean, how long have you been freelancing, and what do you really love about it?
As I alluded to earlier on, I took a redundancy from Fairfax back in 2016. So it's just not quite 7 years ago now. I think the intention was always to dip my toe into the freelance waters, and I was extremely fortunate to have a little bit of a nest egg to come with me into that journey, which made for a soft landing. So that enabled me to not have to hit the road at 100 miles an hour, to use a motoring euphemism. I could pick and choose a little bit to begin with, and one of the good things was coming out of mainstream motoring. I had a good reputation and some good contacts that I could leverage, and that meant that I was able to set things up, take some time and set things up quite well. I was also very, very fortunate that I had a foundation client come on board within the first couple of weeks, who was someone that I had known from my previous work as a journalist, who knew that I was leaving and was available, and they said, "Hey, we want you on our team. Come and work for us. We'll pay you to be on call basically for us," and they're still kind of my base client, and probably around 50 to 60% of my workload goes to them. But it's given me a lot of security, and having the knowledge that income was always going to be there. And then that has been sort of the springboard from which I can then pick and choose who else I want to work with to make up the other, ostensibly 40 or 50% of my week. I can be a little more choosy, and it's I acknowledge it's been very, very fortunate that I haven't really had to hustle in the way that a lot of freelancers do have to. But there is definitely, I think, something to be said for trying to establish a relationship with a client who you can reliably go forward with, and have an arrangement in place for ongoing work.
It's a great strategy.
Yeah, I remember, Steve, you wrote something for us probably back in 2018 now about, it was like the ultimate guide to retainers, and
that's right.
Yeah, it was such a brilliant post, and it just still does amazingly well, because everybody wants that. It's the holy grail, isn't it? Having that anchor client, being on retainer, some of your bills paid every month, you don't need to worry about it. It's the freelance dream, I suppose.
It is a bit, yeah. So how do you find your other gigs, and was it hard at the beginning, or is it easier when you've got a portfolio with a good client that you can share?
Look, again, I acknowledge freely that I've been very fortunate in coming out.
I think I should stop you there, Steve. I think that the fact that you were really good at your job and you worked hard,
I
don't think it's about fortunate. It's about being well deserved. So
absolutely.
All right, fair enough. You can say that, I won't. But look, coming out of mainstream media and having contact and a bit of profile helped me a lot to get established. but that shine wears off after a little while, and after a certain point, you've really got to get on your horse and get moving. So I think there's been I work largely on word of mouth recommendations, and I guess the point of that is that you do good enough work for your clients that they tell other people about you, and then you get a phone call to say, hey, are you available, because such and such told me that you did great work for them. And that's how a lot of my work has come about. But I'm also always looking around, and so, for example, on Rachel's list, of course, there is the regular jobs board. So I keep a very close eye on that, and similarly in a few other groups that I belong to, and LinkedIn, just keeping an eye on what's happening and looking for things that are simpatico with the way that I like to work and the types of clients that I like to work with. And I often refer to it as the never-ending jigsaw. You take bits out and then you put another bit back in, and you're just constantly remaking the
working week.
The working week, exactly right. And and oftentimes you get to the end of a financial year, as we've just done, and you look back over the past 12 months and you realise that only about 50% of the clients that you had 12 months ago are the ones that you're working with now, and you've kind of turned over or regenerated, or sometimes clients come and go with as their content needs change, and sometimes you don't hear from them again, and sometimes you do. 2 years later you'll get a phone call or something like that. But it's just, for me, it's constantly changing, with the exception of the foundation client, but most of the others, it's just that never-ending cycle of change. But it's good, because it means that it's fresh. You're always doing something interesting and new.
Exactly. And speaking about that jigsaw thing, how much is your work journalism versus sort of content writing and copywriting, would you say?
I started out thinking that journalism would account for a large percentage of what I was doing, because I had come from mainstream media, because I had been a commissioning editor myself, and I knew, I believe I know what editors are looking for. But having said that, the actuality is, as most freelancers know, is that pitching to mainstream media is bloody hard work. It can be very self-defeating at times. You knock on the doors and you keep knocking and you keep knocking, and sometimes you get absolutely nothing back. And sometimes, it can be hard to get good direction, and then you file the story and then nothing happens, and then you've got to really struggle to get paid and all that sort of thing. Look, I don't want to downplay it too much, because writing for mainstream media is probably the most fun and rewarding work that there is for a journalist, in the creativity that you're able to unleash, and and that reward of seeing your finished work appear, in a newspaper or a magazine or on a website. There's nothing quite like it. But I think for me, the rate of pay, particularly with many of the mainstream media outlets, is such that I've just gravitated towards more corporate writing, just because it's not necessarily easier, but it's more reliable, and it pays, generally speaking, it pays better. In my case, it certainly has done. And I've just sort of, moved more towards doing a lot more of that. So I probably would say I'm probably 20 to 25% media, and probably 75% corporate writing at the moment, copywriting and that sort of thing, doing speeches and scripts and reports and things.
Wow.
Is it hard to balance that content work with journalism? Because are there some tricky conflicts? I mean, I have the odd conflict with the stuff I do with when you're in a niche. Do you find that?
Yeah, occasionally that has happened. I've got one particular client who are a premium mineral water company, and I started out writing about them as a journalist, and I pitched a few stories which got published, and they were so delighted with that they asked me to come and help them out with writing their website and doing some media releases and things for them. But then subsequently, as they've continued to grow bigger and win awards and have news stories, they've then come back to me and said, hey, can you write and pitch these things? And I've said, look, at this point I actually can't do that, because I'm in your employ. That's a conflict of interest. And so there are things like that, and there's been another client in recent weeks who wanted me to kind of tell their story. They wanted me to write a news story about what they're doing, and I had to just outline to them, look, this can only be, it can go on your website, it can go under your byline by your company, it can't go under my byline, it can't appear to be credible journalism because you're paying me to write this story, and therefore it's being written in a way that reflects that. So yeah, you've just got to be aware. And as someone who's worked in mainstream media and been a commissioning editor, I am hyper aware of where those boundaries sit in terms of conflict of interest, and I have absolutely no interest whatsoever in being on Media Watch.
Yes. Fair enough.
For that conflict of interest, yeah, definitely.
Well, as you've worked as a commissioning editor and you've been on the other side of the fence as well, pitching. I would love to talk to you a bit about, getting that pitch over the line, the research that you do, that sort of thing. Or you've said it's hard even for, seasoned senior journos to get a pitch over the line. But any tips to share with our audience?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm an expert in the art of the pitch, but as a former editor, I've got a pretty good idea of what might fly. And look, as an editor, I was always looking for someone who clearly knew their stuff and had good ideas that I could turn into a workable hook, and someone that was prompt and reliable in the way that they communicated. And when you find, as an editor, when you find a person like that, you tend to just grab and hang on to those rare ones. For freelance writers, I think being that person who is able to generate strong ideas that potentially haven't been written before, or present old material in a new way, and being a person who can deliver what the editor requires. So understand, I mean, they're sort of fundamentals, but at the same time, I think a lot of people lose sight that, understanding the publication that you're pitching to, knowing what type of material they're looking for and what type of stories they're likely to run is just gold, because you're not wasting the editor's time pitching them things that are just completely outside what they're looking for. And just being prompt, reliable in the way that you communicate. Obviously, good writing skills are important, but having said that, as an editor, you're willing to overlook because you know that you can edit the article, you can make it, you can add the sparkle as long as the basic stuff is there. For me, it was more important as an editor to find people who you could work with and who just understood, who just got it. And I think that's, for me, that's really important. And that's something that when I'm pitching, I try to be that person myself, just apply the things that I learned being on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to talk to you because I know you're in Geelong, which is sort of like a regional town, a regional town. Do you think it's harder to get work if you're outside a major city, or do you think it can be an advantage?
I don't think it's a disadvantage. Particularly depending on what type of journalism you're in. Where I've come from in motoring and luxury lifestyle, you've tended to need to be there to go to wherever the product or the thing is. So therefore, there's obviously more travel involved if you're not in a big city. But I think these days most of us understand that you can be anywhere. You can deliver great journalism from pretty much anywhere. As long as you've got a laptop and an internet connection, you can do whatever you need. And speaking from here in Geelong in the depth of the Victorian winter, I kind of wonder why am I not sitting on a beach in far north Queensland right now? I mean, I just as easily could be.
Yes,
well, you were last week.
Relate to that.
You're just having post-holiday blues.
Yeah, this is true.
Well, I'd like to hear about any systems that you have, take us through your average week and how you know that you can fit stuff in. And do you have a system around that, or is it just instinct after this long?
Oh, no, probably not instinct. I use Asana and Trello as a tool for just moving things around and just making sure that I've got something allocated to each day of the week, and assigning a cost to that so that I can work out, because I've got a sort of a spreadsheet running that tells me how much money I need to make in a week to reach my kind of end of year goals. I don't know whether this is the right word, but I've gamified the whole thing, in that setting myself that goal, and then trying to make sure that each day I've got something that pays, something that reaches those goals, and make sure that by the end of the week I've got X amount of money through the door in billables, which then adds up to the right number per month, and then the right number per year. And for me, that keeps me motivated. That keeps me on track. For the first couple of years as a freelancer, I didn't do that, and I got a bit lost, not knowing in any given week or month whether or not I was ahead or behind my targets. And oftentimes you're pulling up at the end of the month and going, okay, well, where's the money? Actually, I don't actually know, and because it is very easy to just lose track of time and just muddle along and get very little done if you're not focused enough. So that's sort of helped me a lot. I use Rounded for all my accounting. I know a lot of people in the Rachel's List group absolutely love it, and for very good reason. I think that's been absolutely crucial for me to help keep track of the financials. And in terms of tech, the only other thing that I would recommend, about 12 months ago now, I bought a digital notepad called a Remarkable, and that has absolutely changed the way that I take notes as well, because I used to be an old school journo with the
notepad and pen
notebooks, just massive piles of them on my desk that just sat there for years, and then you every now and again you would have to find something, and you'd just be going back, flipping through notebooks after notebook to try in vain to find that thing. Whereas this digital notepad, everything is in there. It syncs to my laptop, and it also has optical character recognition, so the notes that I take I can then translate into a Word document. It's just fantastic. So yeah, I can definitely recommend the Remarkable as a note-taking tool, especially for people who are doing interviews or needing to take minutes and that sort of thing.
Definitely. I've got one myself, written about it on Rachel's List, and love it. It's the most expensive notepad that you'll ever buy, but it's so worth it. For all those reasons.
I tell people it costs about the same as an iPhone and does so much less. And
but it does what you're
selling it then.
That's the great thing about it.
It's interesting that you're sort of the notebook person. I think Rach is too. So I think it helps bridge that gap from paper to computer, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are you working on now? Tell us a little about that. What is your average week?
Well, this week I'm just getting back into it after a week away. So I've got some work on this week for a tourism client. I've got an educational case study. I've got some interviews for a construction client, and I've got some work for my automotive client as well. So and next week I've got some work for an agriculture client. So I've got a really broad spread, and I actually like the fact that I've got a broad spread of client work across different industries. And I'm probably the classic archetype of sort of jack of all trades, master of let's say maybe one if we talk about automotive. It's just for me it's just
fun, isn't it, to do different things? Do you tend to write similar stories like blogs, or do you do a bit of white papers? You said you did scripts, video scripts?
I haven't really done white papers, but I do I definitely do video scripts, and I do speeches for one of my clients. A lot of what I do is articles, or sort of more kind of not so much long form, sort of maybe medium form journalism, sort of 800 to 1200 word color pieces. Telling stories is what I pride myself on doing, is being a storyteller. And finding the hook, finding the really interesting, the gold within an interview, or identifying that kind of quirky, interesting, fun little hook, and then expanding on that to turn it into a really readable sort of color piece. That's what I really love to do.
Amazing. What would be your advice to, writers who are listening and love the idea of how you've put your business together and perhaps want to, get into that same mix of corporate writing and perhaps a bit of journalism?
If you're really just starting out, the advice that I tend to give to people who are just getting started is get published. Even if you've got to self-publish, you need to be able to show the prospective editor that you're going to be pitching to what you're capable of. So I think it's really important just to have something, even if it's on your own website, something that shows what you're able to do. Look, I definitely would say that persistence pays off. As someone, as we've talked about, being a former editor, there were a lot of people that I said no to first, second, and third time they came to see me, but then the fourth time they came with a really good idea that just was the right thing at the right time. And some of those people have ended up being regular contributors. They've been those ones that I've grabbed hold of, because you can see that they've got all those attributes that mean that they're going to be a good writer. So knock on as many doors as possible, be persistent, don't be deterred. And the other thing that I would say is think about whether or not there's a specialty, a special subject area that you're really interested in and passionate about, because editors are always looking for specialists, for people who can knowledgeable talk about something and who can be relied upon to know their stuff. And it's a hard one, because when you specialize, obviously you're narrowing your field somewhat in terms of the publications that you can pitch to, but at the same time you can become an absolute golden resource for those particular publications. And you don't have to do 100% of your specialty. You can allocate 25% of your week or 50% of your week to your specialty, like I do, and then the rest of your week can be whatever work you're able to get, or whatever work comes in. So but I think it's good to have a specialty, something that you're known for, something that you can build a reputation around, and it could actually turn into something that you can go 100% and become really, really known for. So that would be something that I would encourage people to think about.
Amazing. Steve, thank you so much. This has just been great hearing about your career journey and getting so much great advice from you. We're definitely going to put a link in the show notes. So tell us where people can find you if they want to hire you. Or just stalk you.
Where can people find me? So I've got a website, which is stevestories.com.au. I guess you can probably find me on LinkedIn. I don't know.
And you're in all Rachel's list and
of course I'm on Rachel's list, and you can send me a message via Rachel's list for sure.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Thanks, Steve. It's really great to hear different freelance journeys. I think that's what we like, that there's no one way to have a successful career. And I like having different niches. I think we've all got a little bit of a niche, and yours is a different one from ours. And I really like that. I think we've learned a lot, and I think it's great to hear. It's also great to hear that you can have a good, successful career, and then you're not in Sydney or Melbourne, and and still spend time with your family and go to the Gold Coast for a week. That's great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Living the dream.
So that brings us to the end of the show this week. But thanks to everyone listening. Thanks to you all and sharing us on social media. So don't forget to leave a rating and review and share it on any of your platforms where you find your podcasts.
Yes. And yes, we'll pop all the show notes in the podcast app, including that fantastic post that Steve wrote for Rachel's list on retainers, which is a really good read.
Yeah, it is.
And we'll do some links to where you can connect with Steve and and also where you can hear more about the Content Bite Summit if you are considering a ticket. We still have some left, don't we, Lynn?
We do. It's actually selling quite fast, but there's always a few left.
Yes. So if you're getting any FOMO, just, go check them out.
Yeah. And I should say thanks again to our sponsors, rounded.com.au, because they're easy in accounting and invoicing software, and they're just made for Australian freelancers and sole traders. So go to rounded.com.au.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.